What's going on, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Before we start on the podcast, I have a Discord channel. Link is in the description. Please go join, get involved, talk about podcasts. Let me know who you want on the podcast next. Let me know what music you want, etc., etc. There's some good conversations going on there. Also, if you listen to this on a regular, please subscribe. Please give us a review on whatever platform you listen on. Always helps, keeps the podcast going. And yeah, thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. This podcast is turning into something that's really interesting, and can't thank you enough for anybody that listens constantly, or if you're a new listener, it's amazing. Thank you so much. So, podcast time this week, an amazing one. A-Trak doesn't really need any introduction. He has had a long career and an extremely successful career in all facets of the industry, from being a DMC world champion at the age of 15 to DJing with Kanye to running a record label and owning a record label, which is one of the most influential record labels in the world in independent hip-hop, dance, electronic music. Having an amazing, fruitful DJ career as a touring artist, releasing some of the biggest dance records in the world, working on hip-hop records, everything. This guy has done everything. You name it, he's done it, and he's done it extremely well every time. So I'm going to stop talking and just let this conversation go. So without further ado, A-Trak. Mr. A-Trak, what is cooking, man?
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. Today is a day for me of recording a bunch of podcasts, and you're the last one. Save the best to last, as they say.
You're warmed up.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm ready to go. It's like I'm in the UK at the moment, so towards the end of the day, or the end of the work day.
Okay.
Yeah, man, I can't complain. Are you in New York right now?
I'm in New York. Yep. So it's morning for me, and I'm good. It's a bit of a short week for me. I'm going to Mexico Thursday through the weekend. So, and it's kind of busy times. You know how September is, like people are back from summer break. It's like, oh, let's do all these meetings. Let's start planning out next year. But also, here's the last chance to finish recording things that I might be able to squeeze out before the end of the year. So it's like this dual thing that's a little crazy. And I have a short week because I'm traveling in 2 days. So it's one of those, but I'm good. Feeling fine.
It's also funny because at the end of the summer, everyone, like, the industry is like that, and it's like, okay, let's start planning next year, blah blah blah. But to forget that, like, every artist has just literally worked every weekend nonstop, midweek, and forget that, like, you might need a few weeks off.
Yeah, although for me, my psycho brain kind of, like, my mind kind of never stops. So during August, I'm always like, I want to have these conversations, and everyone in Europe is away. Can it just be September already so we can just talk about this idea that I've been thinking about? So as soon as September hits, I'm like, okay, so talk tomorrow.
No, I respect that. And there's a level of that's kind of the reason why you're still doing what you're doing so many years of starting it, right?
I guess so, yeah. I've tried to learn to, like, even, like, manage myself a little bit, because my like first instinct is like a little relentless, and like I'm never done with anything. I'm always like, okay, cool, what's next? Let's go.
Yeah.
And I'll, like, wear myself to the ground. So I've tried to get better at that.
Are you happy though?
Yeah, man. Yes, honestly, yes. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm 41, and, like, my career started at 15.
Yeah.
So it's been a while, and, like,
sorry to butt in, but your career started massively when you were 15.
Yes. My career started when I was crowned world champion. So it was just sort of like, all right, let's go, know? and a lot has changed, obviously. I mean, in those years, and we can get into it more, but in those years I was like really just in the hip hop scene and the underground hip hop scene. If you ever told me in those years that I would make house music or anything similar to it, I'd probably be like, what? Like probably wouldn't believe it. You know, and obviously like vinyl to digital, all these changes, and let alone like starting my own company, running a label, all that stuff. Um, I love to DJ.
Yeah.
I never get tired of it. In fact, when there's times where everything else gets crazy, and if I feel like I'm losing my mind, or even if I'm just going through, you know, something on the personal side or loss or major life events, I feel extremely lucky to have DJing, where like I know that if there's a gig around the corner, I can just get on stage or in the booth and like get lost in that. It kind of like equalizes everything in my life. So yeah, I still really love to DJ, and everything else is just kind of spice on top.
It's interesting you say that, because there is like a level of escapism. Like for me, club culture is escapism from reality, right? For the people that are going to watch you play.
Yeah.
Like that's for me the core of a club or a festival, is just escaping that
Escape.
reality.
You mean so for the patrons, for
the
audience.
patrons? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I don't know if they realize that it's escape for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. That's the point. Yeah.
It's interesting because it is, and that hour, 2 hours, however long you're DJing for.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I don't think about anything else.
Oh, for sure. And like that's probably the only time that I'm actually able to like quiet the little thoughts in my head. For sure.
Because even in the studio, I don't know about you, but even in the studio, there's like still external pressures that I can't switch off when I'm in the studio.
For sure. And you know, for sure, in the studio, I'm still, you know, I'm still sort of like keeping tabs on some sort of fool's gold thing. Maybe there's an event that we have to announce the next day, and I'm checking the artwork for the flyer, and I'm making sure that everyone knows what they're going to need to do, and I'm following up on something. And you know, whether I'm working by myself or collaborating, I'm kind of always doing a certain level of another thing at the same time. I probably shouldn't, but I just don't know how to fully stop that. And when I'm DJing, it's like the only thing that actually, like, it's that meditative, like, flow state thing that actually quiets all the other stuff.
How would you fully stop that though? Like, what would you need in your life to stop that?
To stop what? Like thinking about
everything else? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I want to stop that stuff, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't really delved into meditation that much. You know, like I do get into breath work and you know, taking chunks of like, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, just to sort of like, you know, stop in the middle of a busy day and sort of get centered or whatever. But I don't think I've learned to like actually meditate to where you can truly, you know, I was about to say stop those thoughts, but I've heard people talk about it in a way where it's like those things will still pop into your head, but you sort of allow them.
Yeah.
But whatever that is, I don't think I've actually learned that. Still time.
Yeah. I also think if you're happy, then why change?
Yeah, because even like on even as far as like doing what I do musically, both on the DJing side and the, you know, producing side, I kind of work better when I'm doing many things.
Agreed.
You know, like, and everyone's different with that. We all know producers. I think this applies especially on the studio side. We all know producers who can sit in front of the screen for like 12 hours.
Yeah.
And just like bang the shit out and like make a track from start to finish, rough mix, start another one, finish it. I can't make anything in a day. I just can't. Like, that's not how my ideas come. I have all kinds of little roadblocks. but I've kind of learned to use those roadblocks to my advantage and to like bounce from one thing to another. So everything I do creatively is increments.
Yeah.
And so I split my day up into all these little segments. And at least half of my day isn't even creative. Half my day is project, project management or brainstorming or planning the next thing that I want to do, or just thinking of the creative for something that I finished last week or whatever. And then there's that part of the day where I kind of shift gears and get into the music stuff. But even with that, it's on most days, I'm not just doing one thing for a long chunk of time, unless it's really deadline o'clock, unless it's like time to really nail the mix down on a song or like record a mix or something like that. But a lot of times I'll put in like 2-3 hours on one thing, and then I'll just kind of like start hitting a roadblock with that. And I'm like, all right, cool. Let me work on this DJing thing that I've been trying to do, or let me film a little routine for socials, or let me catch up with my downloads, and I'll just do something else. And then when I get tired of that, let me just prep a couple samples for something I'm going to work on tomorrow. And everything is little increments with me. And that's just I've just kind of accepted that I work better like that. I wish I could just sit and bang out a remix in a day. I would do so many more of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you structure that like routinely, where you like from 10 to 12 you're doing this, and 12 to this, and is that in your calendar like ready to so everyone knows what you're doing?
Kind of, yeah. I'm kind of a timekeeper. I only realized this. It's funny because like someone pointed this out to me like literally earlier this year. I was like, wow, you really like think about time and like what, like from this hour to that hour. Even on a like leisurely day, if I have a day off, I'll still be like, all right, so I'm gonna just chill, maybe read until this time. Ooh, then I'll go get food at that spot at that time, and then I'll go to get a massage. But like I'll just map out the hours.
Yeah.
And it might even like, I suspect that this comes from like when I first started messing around with scratching and DJing and I was still in school.
Yeah.
And I structured my days that way, and that's how I taught myself how to DJ.
Yeah.
Where I knew that I would come home from class at like 3:30, walk back to the house, and when I decided that scratching was going to be like my passion and I was going to work on it every day, it became this very regimented and timed out thing where it's like, cool, get home from school from 4 to 7. I'm going to practice whatever scratches I'm working on this week, and then have dinner with my family and homework after dinner, and then start again the next day. And there's something about that really worked for me, where I was able to like improve a lot, like learn a lot quite fast.
Yeah.
And giving myself these time constraints is kind of how I've structured my whole life since then. I think if you give me 2 weeks that are fully open to like, I don't know, make an EP or something, I probably won't get it done as well than if I like force these other things.
Yeah.
I just kind of work best when I know what's my start and end time, and like I have to get it done.
No, I get that, and I think for me, it was more so, again, at the beginning of my career, when I knew I needed to work towards something. It was like when I was working full time, I would come home and I'd produce until something came of it. And then I'd wake up, go to the gym, do it all over again, really. And
did you start with production first and then DJing?
No, I started with DJing, and it came very quick. Producing came very quickly. So I started DJing when I was 13.
Oh, cool.
And then the production came around 14, 15, but I didn't really take it serious. I didn't take production seriously until I was like 18, probably. And then I was like, okay, you need to produce to because my DJing, I was just mixing house, like soulful house records. It wasn't
Nice.
like yourself, where like your DJing was like playing an instrument realistically.
Yeah.
And then me realizing that to become a bigger DJ, to become more successful in the art of DJing, you have to release music.
You need a big tune.
Yeah, I need a big one. But how was it being thrown into this industry at such a young age and having the limelight pushed on you? Obviously, you don't know any different. That is all you know. But like, how was that feeling?
It's true that it's all I know, and I think there's all these like layers to that experience that I've continued to like process and come back to and try to, and even things that I felt like I had to untangle a bit for years, man. Like even to this day, like I think like when I'm in therapy now, there's still things that come up where I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably because like I wired myself to be a workhorse maniac when I was 13, 14. But mostly positive. So, great. Dude, it was awesome. Yeah. For the most part, finding my passion at a young age and finding success at it, it was a dream come true. It's just that it also, there's a regimented life and the level of, you know, taking on responsibility, which also involves a level of sacrifice in other parts of your life that were, you know, pretty intense, like an Olympic athlete or something.
What sacrifice?
Or like a child actor or one of those things.
Yeah. But what were those for you?
Well, so, you know, it started off simple. It started off with literally me like trying to scratch and realizing like, hey, I can kind of do this.
Yeah.
You know, and then really taking it seriously. And I was lucky to have, still lucky to have an older brother who was already a musician. So while he wasn't a DJ himself, he had a musical ear and he had heard actual DJs because he was starting to go to clubs. So Dave, my brother, when he heard me mess around with scratching, he was able to say with quite a bit of conviction, you should do this. Like take this seriously, you know? And so that kind of gave me the extra little battery pack to be like, all right, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly, you know, every day after school, like I mentioned, I started practicing and I think like just for whatever reason, like my mind, the way I think I'm pretty methodical already, you know? So I gave myself structure, even in terms of like my practice time and what I would work on each day and the way that I would sort of build up like literally a vocabulary of scratches and like the steps to my practice to keep things going forward and to improve at a certain rate. So I really put that structure on myself. But yeah, man, the first battle that I entered was the DMC battle. You know, Montreal had a hip hop scene that, you know, my friend group, and again, my brother and his friends, I was just kind of hang out with him and his friends a lot.
Yeah.
You know, they were making music. So, you know, I was just around that scene. I was starting to go to record stores. You go to the record shop, they got a flyer for the DJ battle that's happening. There's one a year, you know? So I was just kind of aware of it also. Like in those years, I guess what I'm trying to say is like nowadays DJ battles are less part of, you know, most music fans don't know that there's someone that won a DJ championship.
Yeah.
You know, ironically, because DJing's bigger than ever. But in those years, you know, the year before me, it was DJ Noize from Denmark. Every hip hop fan knew about him. The year before that was Rock Raider. Everyone knew about Rock Raider. So it was just this thing that you knew about if you were in that section of the hip hop scene. So I entered a battle because I'd been, you know, training, practicing for close to 2 years. And it starts with the Montreal elimination. So there's a little flyer at the record shop that's like, if you want to enter, you know, send a cassette of yourself to this address, record a little tape, mail it. I don't remember how long later, but at some point I get a call, you know, on the house phone at my parents' house. Hey, you're in. cool. So go to the battle, I win. Montreal champion, you know, and I'm at that point I was 14. I wasn't even 15
Wow.
yet. And there's all these, you know, like there's Montreal is not that big of a city, so like I knew about most of the DJs in that battle. In fact, I had met a few of them already, and there's a few of them that were already kind of mentors to me, and I beat all of them. Like it was kind of weird. And already there's starting to be a little bit of buzz of like, oh shit, Canadian finals. Because when you win the Montreal Heat, you're, you know, the next step is to participate in the Canadian finals. Where like I had heard about these Toronto DJs, and Toronto is the bigger city in Canada. So there was kind of this sense of like, all right, I might not be able to beat the Toronto guys, but you know, maybe I can place in the top three.
Yeah.
Won the Canadian finals, and then they're like, you got to go to the world finals. And I'm telling the boss of DMC, like, I need to tell my school that I need a few days off. And you know, I go to Italy because every year the DMC World Finals were in a different place. That year, they were in Rimini, where there was some sort of dance music convention. And I win that. Like literally, the first thing that I entered that led me to me being world champion. And it was a little crazy, but also exhilarating. And in, you know, in the process of that, I met Hubert, who was like the Yoda, the dawn of scratching. And he was starting to like sort of bring me into his crew. He had a DJ crew based in San Francisco called the Invisible Scratch Pickles. And of course, he was like 10 years older than me. And like San Francisco is quite far from Montreal, so it was more of a symbolic thing more than anything. When he said you're going to be down with the Invisible Scratch Pickles, you know, it was almost like a title. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we co-signed this guy. He's down with us. Maybe it's a way for him to make sure that someone else didn't snatch me. I don't know, but it was, you know, maybe it was a chess move. But whatever it was, I appreciate it. It was actually, it was the highest honor. It was like, so you know, the same summer it was kind of announced that I was an honorary member of this super prestigious scratch DJ crew, and I won the DMC World Championships. And I also remember a couple things. One, right after I won that battle, I slept for like 2 days straight.
Wow.
And I don't think that I realized what all that was, but certainly I was like keeping myself super focused and disciplined leading up to the battle. Like even like flying to Italy with my mom as a chaperone. I brought my own turntables and mixer to set them up at the hotel room to practice before, because I couldn't even imagine not practicing for like 2 days before the battle.
Yeah.
Like I was so used to training all the time, like a gymnast.
Yeah.
Like it's really more similar to an Olympic sport than to another form of, you know, being in a band or a singer or whatever. Like it's that level of training. So, you know, brought my turntables, you know, including like the voltage converter and all that stuff, you know, and set up on the little dingy table at the hotel, and was just like keeping myself, you know, so focused. I probably didn't even understand jet lag or any of that. And like, I was just so concentrated on making sure that I performed well at the battle when it was going to be important, when there's that one moment to do that thing that you've been rehearsing, practicing time and time again for months and months, where it's muscle memory, but you know that the circumstances are a little bit different when you're on that stage. Maybe the height of the decks is a little different.
Totally.
You got to block out the crowd a little bit, but you got to still remember to look up and look like you're into it. Like, you know, perform it physically in a way, but still stay focused enough on what your hands are doing so that you don't miss a microsecond, because everything is timed down to the microsecond. So I'm up there like the gymnast doing my little routine, trying to make sure I pull it off. And I don't think I realized that even just the effort of keeping that form was such that as soon as the pressure was off, there'd be something in probably my subconscious, somewhere in my like mind body thing. Once it's done, there's something in me that knows, okay, pressure's off.
Yeah.
Now we can rest. And I literally slept for 2 days. And the other thing is, like, I really remember sort of coming home and like after a little while hearing little rumblings of like haters of some at some level, which was a new thing because from up until that point it was all enthusiasm. It was just like, who's this kid? Whoa, he's just a kid. Have you seen the kid? He's literally just a kid. He's from Canada. Wow, there's never been anyone in the world finals from Canada. Not only is there a Canadian in the finals now, but he's just a kid. Have you seen the kid? Like, and everyone was just like, can I see the kid? You know? And I go and I win. And like that year also, DMC brought out a bunch of the past champions to be judges. So I'm out there and I'm winning the thing, but the judges are Rock Raider, Noise, Cash Money, all these greats, Cutmaster Swift, and they're all so cool to me. And everyone's like, yo, you know, Rock Raider's like, yo, when you come to New York, come by the house, here's my number, da-da-da. So like all my heroes are telling me we're gonna be friends now.
So cool.
It's crazy. And that even that in itself really affected how I try to be with like the younger generations now. But like it was positive. Then I get home and I start hearing like, yo, man, so-and-so in such and such city is saying that you only won because of blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do about that? And like that level of it started coming back to me. And I had to learn to, you know, build the thick skin and like just figure out how I was going to process those little, and you know, it's pre-internet. The internet kind of existed, but it was just slow dial-up. Like, so the information you're getting is hearsay. It's like,
of course, Chinese whispers.
Yeah, exactly. That person said that person said that person said that, and you don't even know what they really said. And but I think with that too, I kind of built a certain ability to just block shit out.
Yeah.
And just work. And actually, I remember like having this sort of, I don't know, this period of a few months after winning that first DMC where I got way better. Because I remember doing my first show in New York, like maybe 3 months later.
Yeah.
Meeting all these New York DJs, and they were like, yo, why didn't you do that at the World Finals? And I was like, this is my new shit. This is what I just came up with coming home from that trip.
Yeah.
And I think that was a reaction that I had to like, oh, people want to test me? All right, let me get to work.
Game on.
So my reaction to everything was like, word, let me get to work.
Yeah.
But I turned myself into like just everything was work for me. It's like, okay, cool. If I practice more, I can solve this problem, that problem, this. And, you know, there's a point where that's not sustainable. And of course, I'm sort of cutting out any kind of normal life, you know, any kind of normal teen experience. I had a good group of friends in school, but I would just see them at school.
Yeah.
And I just fully had a double life. I had my life in school. I took school seriously. I had great friends over there, and I saw them while I was there.
Yeah.
And then I had this new music life, and they didn't really intersect.
Do they intersect now?
My personal life and my music life?
Yeah.
More than before, but it's still this thing that I feel like I'm like, it's still this thing that I'm trying to get better at.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think even just a few years ago, it was quite separated.
Yeah.
So that's always a work in progress for me.
Well, it's also just a strange industry to have both lives work together, I think, because it's such a sociable industry, and all of our friends in the industry are in sociable situations. Whereas like, I think especially as we get older, like our friends outside of the industry don't want to be going to a rave every weekend. They don't want to be doing that.
Well, there's that too, especially at a certain age. I was literally talking about that at dinner last night. I was telling my friend, like, you know, there's a, you know, because I had like a couple of sort of growth periods in my career where it just felt like there was like a new thing happening. So I was at dinner with a friend, and we were reminiscing like the early full school years when I first moved to New York, and I had this whole friend group, and we all lived in the same neighborhood. We all lived in Williamsburg, and if one of us was DJing, we would all go to the club. Oh, let's all go to Studio B. Let's all go to Love or this spot or that spot, Webster Hall. Nowadays, if I'm playing in town and I'll hit my friends like, yo, you want to come? most of them have kids, have normal lives. So like they're like, you're playing from 1 to 3. Like, I can't. I'm sorry. Like, tell me when you're doing an afternoon party. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely, as you get older, it definitely changes. And then you
And
have
for us, I think there's a funny side of being like, am I the weird one for still being out in the club late at night? You know?
100%. And also that like the fact that we're getting older and the crowd isn't.
Yes. Yeah.
That's always
But
just something that
that
screws my head up.
yeah, that part is a little complex, like layered for me because I have like different pockets of fans. And there
Yeah.
certainly are some who are my age or older. There's people who found out about me when I was 15,
Yeah.
you know. So there's some that are older than me. There's some that are, dating back to sort of early full school years. So they're certainly younger than me, but by now they're probably 30. So they're not 21 anymore. They're not going out every night. And then there's new people who are just kind of going out now and, you know, pretty early on, like once I started doing a few other things after those DJ battles, even by the time I started working with Kanye, I realized that there was people who knew me from one thing or another thing. I'm talking about like general music fans. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, I know the name A-Trak," and they'll know like a thing or two I did, but they won't know like there's a bunch of stuff that they don't know, and I'm totally fine with that. I don't expect everyone to know my Wikipedia by heart, but it's always interesting like observing, even just getting to a show, looking at the crowd, and just sort of like at a glance trying to get a sense of like what's the what are they into, what could I serve them that could work, and like which slice of things I've done.
Yeah.
What slice of the things I've done are they excited enough about that made them buy a ticket to come see me tonight?
It must be interesting though, because your career has been so broad in the grand scheme of a DJ life, right?
Yeah.
Like, and producer, like the music that you've released, the parties you played, the artists you've worked with. It's not just a one track kind of direction.
It would be easier if it was, honestly.
No, I get that.
Like there's definitely been plenty of periods where it's been challenging to even just like galvanize enough of a group of people to buy tickets to fill up a room of a certain size, because it's not, you can't really summarize what I'm trying to present. Like I choose to take the complicated road.
You did.
And instead, if you could just say like tech house, or Dutch house, or trap, or whatever it is, but one thing, and there's enough people that are like, oh, I like Dutch house, and they would just buy those tickets. But for me, it's like, he made this song and that song, and he also worked with this guy, but he's got hip hop shit too. Oh, and he won these championships, and he did this, and he's from Montreal, but he lives in New York, but a little bit LA, but mostly New York, and it's like, geez.
I hear that, but I also think longevity wise, there's more longevity in doing multiple things.
I think so. I do. Yeah, I think, there's a bit of a tortoise and a hare thing where like, when artists get known for one thing and they're able to do this sort of like factory chain thing where they can pump out more iterations of that thing, and they can blow up really fast that way. That can go very high quite fast, but it's not everyone who's able to keep that going past the sort of 4 or 5 year mark. A lot of times any music scene cycles out.
I agree.
After 4 or 5 years. So then there's an existential thing after that for those artists of like, do they keep doing that thing when it's not what the coolest thing anymore? And whereas, for me, I haven't had, I guess, aside from those DJ battles in the very beginning where I had a quick ascension that was like straight vertical, anything I've done since then hasn't been like the straight all the way up to the highest heights thing. I've never been like the, you know, top DJ of any period of time,
Yeah.
but I'm totally happy being in the conversation
All the
for
time.
for over 25 years, you know, like that's
Yeah.
just that, and like that's like maybe that's a choice also, you know.
I think it's really interesting though, because there's nobody that I can think of that has had a career similar to you and achieved what you've achieved, and still achieving that in multiple different ways. And I think,
I mean, there's, you know, I would say my biggest inspiration for my career arc is Jazzy Jeff,
yeah,
you know, and I think there's something about Jazzy Jeff where a lot of people sort of don't even fully realize some of his achievements, but like he really was world champion battle DJ.
yeah,
And then, you know, as Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, like his rap group was truly, you know, enormous chart topping, won the first rap Grammy, like, you know, extremely successful on the music side, but then built, you know, a music studio that produced very successful albums, that whole neo soul thing, Jill Scott, like those, you know, those R&B artists, that was him. And, you know, also perennial touring DJ. You know, when I that's he's really been my model for like even just the very first element of what I just said, which is just like going from being battle DJ to even something else, just having, you know, having a place in music scenes, music forums that don't necessarily check for DJ battles. Because that's the one thing that's been kind of odd for all battle DJs is it's actually kind of rare for, you know, champion battle DJs to sort of get out of that scene.
Yeah.
And to really penetrate, you know, the festival circuit as just a DJ that plays songs that's not, you know, only there as the crazy scratch person. And producing songs. There's not that many DJs that went from turntablism to the other sides of DJing.
What was the realization for you that you needed to do that?
You know, I think part of it probably came from the simple fact that when I was doing the battle stuff, I was so young.
Yeah.
That like even after 4 or 5 years, I battled from 97 to 2000.
Yeah.
And, you know, ended up with 5 world titles, which at the time was some sort of record, and like won all this stuff by the time I was 18. But like, so even when I got to the point of like, all right, I think I'm done with battling, because I remember really feeling like it was starting to not even be worth the crazy effort anymore. I would spend like kind of half my year just coming up with new material. Like I would spend months and months and months challenging myself, pushing myself, trying to come up with something better than whatever I did last year so I could still win something this year. And after a while, you know, if there was like, I don't know, an interview with me, an article, something, they would say, he won the 97 DMC, like the first thing that I won. And I'd be like, I just worked my ass off winning this other thing last month. And I think people still only know the first thing I did. Or after a while, they were like, he won many things. And I'd started feeling like, okay, do I need to still drive myself crazy to win this one other thing? I think people get it. Like, I'm also itching to try other things. I was also, even just on a sort of like personal growth level, by the time I was 18, I wanted to experiment with like making some sort of music. And I didn't even really dive into production fully until later, but like even just like, I don't know if you've ever heard some of those like scratch songs, like if you've ever listened to like an Executioner's album or a Qbert, you know? Scratch music was a thing, you know, where you would just...
I was obsessed with Qbert.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I like bought his DVDs and everything.
Right. I mean, Wave Twisters is still crazy.
Yeah.
Still sounds futuristic. So I was trying to do stuff like that. In fact, like I think that album had just come out and it was really inspiring me, like, oh, I should do some stuff like that, you know? So, but I got out of my battling phase at 18. So I still had a lot of, you know, anyone at 18 still has their whole life ahead of them.
Definitely.
So I think I was like,
yeah.
Cool, what should I try now? And, you know, I didn't even really know how to like play like the rock, just like a regular party set.
Yeah.
Until I really stopped battling and started playing more shows kind of outside of those turntablist circles, you know, because at that point in time, I just had like somewhat of a name where I could get booked even internationally. So I was already going to Europe, I was already going to Asia, you know, and a bunch of cities in North America. And in fact, in North America, what was funny was I was getting booked at raves, even though I was a hip hop DJ, because raves loved scratching.
Yeah.
But I wasn't even like acknowledging any music in the other rooms. I wasn't even it's crazy now. I kept a lot of the flyers from those early shows I did, and it's crazy to look at flyers where I'm like, what the fuck? Like I played at the same parties as like Daft Punk and Sneak and you know, and Chemical Brothers and like Montreal had amazing concerts. Or I would even go to other cities, go to like Oakland or San Francisco or, you know, all these other places. I played some of the, you know, I played the first Coachella ever. I played some of the early Ultras. Yeah, I played the first Coachella.
Wow.
It was just a rave in the desert. It wasn't like there was nothing about it aside from the fact that it was in that field.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that's comparable really to what it is now. But it's only when I, you know, went out and played those shows that I also learned to like actually DJ, like to put together a set and learn how to like read different crowds and yeah.
It's interesting because it's such two different worlds, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You can literally be the best scratch DJ in the world, yet have never played in front of a crowd to entertain a crowd in a set process, in a set
or
setting.
to make them dance. Yeah.
When it's not
in
about
those first couple of years for me, like, when I was 15, 16, 17, I was getting booked at shows and I was playing, you know, maybe an hour, but I was getting booked for that 15-minute solo that I would do, where it was almost like a traveling circus thing. Like, come see the bearded woman, like, you know, come see the fish man. It was like, come see that kid that won the crazy thing and he can scratch really well and do all these crazy tricks. And then I kind of would like fill up the rest of the hour and just kind of brought records that I liked. Up a crate with shit. I've always been pretty stubborn with like just playing what I want anyways, but I think it was particularly self-obsessed in those years, like, let me just play tracks I like. And then like at one point literally just grab the mic, you guys want to see some shit, and then do my little routine, and everyone came forward and watched.
That's so cool. So cool.
It is cool. It's also funny, and but there's a point where I had to actually learn to rock parties, and with that there was a few steps to that, because, you know, initially it was hip hop. And, you know, many years later, when I got into house music and electro and whatever else that was being made in the mid 2000s, I had to learn how to play that. And there's just such a different style of mixing.
Yeah. Different crew as well. Different crews, different mentality, different.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's different.
Yeah, everything's different. I mean, all the way down to like the very basic distinction that, for the most part, when you play a hip hop set, you're playing songs that people know, and you're playing with that recognition thing. You know, like there's a shared pool of music that you and your audience knows, and it's all about what you're going to pick from that and when and how you put it together. And every song you drop, they're like, oh, you played this. Oh, you played that one. Oh, I love this one. And you're just playing with that. And electronic music is, you know, that journey thing is so different. Like there's, you know, amazing sets where the audience doesn't know a single song that the DJ played. So that's a whole different approach. You know, keeping songs mixed together for much longer and learning what works with that is different. You know, again, in hip hop, you're mixing what maybe like 4 to 8 bars, you know, and if anything, you might blend an acapella over an instrumental. But like, yeah, when I got into house and electro and all that, and really like playing a lot of shows with Mehdi, I've had a lot of teachers in my career, and he was one of my teachers for sure. And you know, Mehdi and I, quickly became kindred spirits, you know. And as soon as we met, we sort of realized, like, oh, we both started off as sort of teenage stars in the hip hop world.
Is that where Mehdi started? I did not know that. I didn't know Mehdi started in hip hop.
Man, so there's a documentary being made about him now, and I'm really glad that they're going to tell that full story. When Mehdi was literally 16, he was in the studio producing beats for like MC Solar and a lot of those French rappers.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, he was like the wonder kid of French hip hop producers. And then he worked with a couple of other big French rap groups. 113, which 113 is what it means, that they were very popular. He produced them, Ideal J, Mafia Kayne, these really, really big French rappers. He was making beats for all of them before, you know, turning to electronic music. So when we met, and, you know, Ed Banger was still pretty young and Fool's Gold was literally in its infancy, and we were both like, oh, I'm the guy in the team that's like, was the young hip hop guy, and now I'm into this other stuff, you know. We got really tight fast, and we started playing shows together, but I was still kind of like getting a sense of, like, there was all this music that I was finding on blogs. You know, this is like 2006 or so.
Bloghouse days.
Yeah. And, you know, as we all know, Bloghouse isn't even one sound. It could be anything, you know? Like, maybe it was a Switch and Sinden remix one day.
Yeah.
And some early Crooker stuff the next day. But then, you know, Simian Mobile Disco. But then even just the Klaxons and like some,
It
was,
you know, yeah. It was indie. It was just indie influenced.
Yeah, it was just this like period of collision between all these sounds. Like, oh shit, Boys Noize did a remix of Block Party Banquet. Whoa, let me play that. You know, like, but sonically that's so different from a Hervé track, you know?
Yeah.
But so I was grabbing all these things, and I was even like, it was a big leap for me from going from 10 years as like a fully hip hop DJ who didn't play other styles.
Yeah.
To starting to experiment with playing different genres. And there was a few steps that led to that. But I remember even when I started playing some of those, you know, electro bloghouse tracks, I felt that I still needed to put like pieces of hip hop in those songs. So I was making bootlegs where I was putting like rap acapellas and vocals over any of those songs that I liked and that I wanted to start putting in my sets. And that's, you know, there's a mixtape that I did called Dirty South Dance that was kind of just the bootlegs that I was making for my sets, and then I just mixed them into a mixtape. But that was my process of like trying to figure out how to dip my toes into this other sound that I liked, but without it being too much of a departure of, you know, the scene that I was such a big part of for so long. But yeah, I guess to the earlier point that I was making, there was even like an actual technique to the mixing that I was learning, you know. And I remember going to watch certain DJs. I remember watching Felix the House Cat and like even like early Steve Angelo days, like going to watch any of those DJs and being like, just like watching what they did with the EQs and being like, oh, see, like that's not how I learned to DJ, but in this system, I get what this does, and then trying to like work that in myself. But then still, when I would do it my way, I would still sort of like scratch things in and like, you know, keep my identity. So picking up on the things that work when you mix that sound and like still keeping myself in that student mindset, but also then doing it my way, you know, once I felt comfortable with it.
Yeah, it gives it identity as well, right? It gives you yourself your own identity. I want to go into after that kind of period in your life when I don't know the full, what came first, was it the Kanye or the Fool's Gold?
Kanye.
How did
In
that
fact,
happen?
Fool's Gold's a big part of the reason why I stopped working with Kanye. I worked with Kanye from 2004 to end of 2007, early 2008. And then Fool's Gold was founded at the start of 2007. So there was 1 year of overlap. And then I kind of realized like I can't do all of this at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Kanye gig was really like the first significant new chapter after I stopped battling.
Yeah.
The first thing that like brought me new fans, gave me a new musical identity, just added another chapter to the story.
Yeah.
Post.
How did that all come about? Because I'm fully aware of it, and I think a lot of people are, but I also think there's a lot of people listening that know you from newer days, that are kind of getting into this shit, that don't have a clue what you did for Kanye and kind of everything behind that story as well. So how did that all like come across?
Well, I think it's even important to point out that like when I met him in 2004, most rappers didn't really have a DJ, or their DJ wasn't an important part of the show.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like there was this machine that was being used in those years called the instant replay. That was just literally it's a machine that was made for radio jingles. And it's this big thing that's like kind of bigger than an MPC with a bunch of small pads, and rap groups would just kind of like load up their instrumentals on these buttons, and that replaced the DJ for a long time.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, honestly, I think in large part because when Kanye was like leading up to his album, he was going on the road with artists like Common and Talib Kweli, who had great DJs. You know, shout out to Dummy, Common's DJ. I think he's probably a big part of the reason why Kanye thought I need a DJ, because he saw Common's DJ. So when Kanye put out the College Dropout, after years of like trying to start his solo career, he finally was gonna hit the road himself and needed a DJ. As it turns out, I was in that phase of my career after I was done with battling, where I would just get booked in various cities and just go play a show, play some sort of hip hop set, and scratching. And I was kind of messing around with loop pedals in those years and doing sort of like live scratch loops, or you know, still in the relatively underground hip hop scene. And it just so happens that I got booked in London the same sort of weekend that Kanye was in London, during what I think was kind of a Rockefeller promo week. It was like a press run that the whole label was doing, because Damon Dash was there too. And that's when I met him as well. And I think the tickets for my show were like not selling that great. So the promoter was like, oh, let's do an in-store, you know, let's just make sure more people in London know that you're in town.
Yeah.
And there was a record shop at the time called Deal Real, and they had some really cool in-stores. So I did an in-store at Deal Real. I actually ended up doing 2 of those that weekend. One where I met Damon Dash and some of the Rockefeller people, but the Deal Real guys invited me to come back and do something on the second day, because John Legend was in town with Kanye. At the time, no one knew John Legend aside from hardcore Kanye West fans or Rockefeller fans. John Legend didn't have a record out yet. He was just Kanye's piano man, you know? So he was going to do something at Deal Real. So the guys from the shop were like, yo, come back tomorrow. We got John Legend. Kanye's in town too. Like, they're saying he might show up. They saw me do a routine with one of Kanye's tracks, Get By, the Talib Kweli song. So they were like, yo, you got to come back to the shop and do that thing that you do with Get By, because we think that Kanye is actually going to show up for this John Legend thing. Now, this is a very small shop. Like it's, size of a small living room or something. And that is what happened. I did my little routine at the, record store, and Kanye was there to support his new artist, John Legend, and saw me do what I do. And that's how we met. He didn't know about me prior to that, and he like had to run off. I didn't even really get to talk to him then and there, but like I had gotten on the first day I'd grabbed like Damon Dash's assistant's contacts. I was like hitting the assistant, like, yo, I need to like meet up with you guys. Are you still in town? Da da da. Figured out how to like run into Kanye again, because I knew that something happened when he saw me. I saw his facial expression, and I was just like, I need to pursue there's something here, And it's funny thinking back, because like I even remember like I was in a period of my career where like it had been a few years since I stopped the battles and all that stuff, and like I felt like there was another thing that I needed to find with just my own direction, and I wasn't sure what that thing was. And there's just something in me when I was at that shop and did that little routine and just kind of turned to the side and, saw that Kanye was watching me and reacting a certain way. I just felt like I needed to like track him down. And track him down I did. And we had a quick chat where he was just, I'm like, yo, I'm the DJ from the record store. Oh shit, yo, everybody stop, da-da-da. Yo, what's your name, da-da-da. And like, even the people with him knew about me. They're like, that's A-Trak. He won some big championships. It's like, I don't know, okay, cool. But I remember him being like, you ever been on tour? And I was like, yeah, I've toured as a DJ. But he's like, no, like with a rapper. He's like, yeah, I'm going on tour like this summer. I need a DJ, take my man's number, make sure you call him, blah, blah, blah. And like, that was it. Like he had to run. I had to go catch my flight, but that's how we met. And like the follow up to that conversation led to me going on tour. Initially, the first tour I did with Kanye was him opening up for Usher. So it was called the Truth Tour. So it's the year that Usher had the Confessions album, the album with and all that. So Usher was the biggest thing in music, like MTV audience, like teenagers.
Yeah. Stadiums.
And also, or at least big arenas, and they were like the main opener right before Usher was Kanye, but the show was Kanye, myself, John Legend. That's it. Just the three of us on stage. And we never rehearsed. We did one sound check the day of the first show, and it was like off to the races, including, some bumpy starts, just trying to figure shit out. But me playing the tracks and scratching on stuff, and John Legend, adding piano accompaniments and obviously singing, and Kanye rapping without a hype man. It was just the three of us on stage in front of like, I don't know, 12, 13, 14,000 people in a bunch of cities. No rehearsals. Like if we needed to try something, we would do a quick sound check. But, through that tour, we built a certain trust. There's something that worked. And when that tour was done, I remember he was like, all right, well, we're going to Europe next. You want to come? And that turned into 4 years. But it was 4 years of working together where it was more than just being the show DJ. I mean, even as the DJ, there was a level of involvement that, I didn't know the term musical director.
Yeah.
But when on the following album, with Late Registration, when he started bringing on a string section, and there was 12 string players and a harpist and all this stuff, and he wouldn't go to rehearsals, and he would just tell them like, talk to A-Trak, he'll tell you how the songs go. I didn't realize that I was actually the MD, but that's what I was doing. I was dealing with the other musicians. There was other tours where we had percussionists and keyboard players and background singers. Never a full band. It was always like just to have that hip hop sort of knock.
Yeah.
It was always the tracks coming from my setup and then other musicians adding embellishments on top.
Nice.
And, you know, even when there would be award show performances, the Grammys, VMAs, all kinds of things where any performance playback comes from the production truck of that show. He would get into arguments with like the VMA people, like, no, A-Trak has to hit play. He knows how I start Gold Digger. There's a specific cue. I don't trust you guys. He can hit play. So there's like a deep involvement with that. But, you know, and then I scratched on some of the songs. I scratched on, you know, Common's album, B, that Kanye produced, and scratched on Gold Digger and Stronger, and sort of made the Daft Punk connection. And even on a sort of like cultural level, there was a lot of exchanges between us where, you know, I moved to New York in the midst of those years, and I was like getting to know some of the, you know, young streetwear brands. I was going down to Soho, shopping at Union in some of those stores, and meeting the guys that had t-shirt lines, and you know, it was the era of like all over print hoodies and everyone having a t-shirt brand. And I befriended a lot of those designers and introduced some of those people to Kanye, because he was growing frustrated trying to find designers through like his management team that wasn't like tapped into like
the scene,
you know, what was going on as much like on the streetwear level. But then he would connect me with like, you know, if I wanted to do like a sort of elevated kind of photo shoot, like, you know, things I wanted to do with my DJing that kind of stood out from the pack of other DJs, I could turn to him and be like, all right, fucking fashion man, like we should do my press shots this year. And he would, you know, connect me with people. So it was a very fruitful exchange for many years, you know, which obviously now it's all weird and I don't talk to him because things got awful. But in that period,
what got bad?
He's an anti-Semite and a few other things. Yeah, just the things that he said in recent years. Ever since he put the Trump hat on, I kind of cut ties. Yeah. So it's been many years now where I'm just like, I can't have a rapport with him.
It's so strange how an artist went so hard on that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't even love talking about it because everything gets turned into a soundbite for press after.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you would, but like things get out there. But
yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah,
but I guess that the thing is, as long as you can look back and look at that period of time where it was special and take those enjoyable moments out of it, like that's so important.
People are complex.
Yeah. Of course.
When I was working with him, he, you know, there weren't any, you know, racist or awful opinions being spoken.
No.
It's weird. It's complicated. But you know, I think people change, but then people don't really change. Like I think there's for anyone who, you know, takes one of those like really awful turns, you can look back and find little hints of something that may have been there early on in a extremely diminished way, but like unfortunately it's never a total surprise when you really sit and think about it.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, people do change, and yeah, I think it's important to like know what you stand for, and like
100%. And you have to have your own opinions and you have your own morals, and you have to respect them yourself. And if others around you can't respect that, then you don't need them in your life. No matter how famous that person is, no matter how successful that person is, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it.
Sure. And I also think like, that even zooming out of the Kanye thing specifically,
Yeah.
but just thinking about artists in general, because there's plenty of artists who were hailed as these sort of prophet figures.
Of course, yeah.
Right? This can be a jazz conversation. This can be a painting and art conversation. It could be it literally for any segment of art. This applies. There's artists who come on the scene and change everything and are seen as prophets and galvanize all kinds of shit and inspire all these other artists for literally decades after. But does that last forever? Like that thing that people see as a form of prophecy. I mean, this could probably even be applied to like spiritual and religious questions too. Like, I don't think that that's something that stays within a person their whole life.
No.
I think that when you really think about it, some of the most influential, greatest artists have that thing for maybe a decade.
Yeah.
You know, and then I think people like these great artists, we could be talking about Picasso or fucking Miles Davis, like, you know, I'm talking about that type of conversation. And by the way, a lot of them are also probably dirtbags as human beings too, but there wasn't social media. But that's important to say too. A lot of those artists were dirtbags.
Yeah.
They stay touched in some way as artists. So their work stays interesting the rest of their life. But I do think that that thing doesn't stay with that artist. Like that, the true fire, the magic, the shit that is completely world changing doesn't really stay with someone for their whole life. And I think it also becomes interesting when you observe the later decades of those artists' 100%. Work. How do they deal with their own, like with their own work, knowing that it's not quite as world changing as that crazy run that they have? Or do they just sort of like stick to a form that they created and they just do that thing? Or, you know, and a lot of artists then have sort of spurts of like great work, not so great work. You can even talk about Prince, and I think Prince is the greatest, but like, you know, there was like that decade where Prince was like literally the greatest thing that there's ever been.
Yeah.
And then there's weird Prince albums after. You know? And even the weird ones have moments of greatness. But I think even on a sort of ego level, when you look at some of those artists, like how did they continue to compose with the fact, like they know that they're not on fire the same way anymore. And how do they still make their work? Or some people just don't put anything out because I wonder sometimes, like one of my favorite artists is D'Angelo. And I think his 2 albums are literally perfect.
Yeah.
First 2 albums. And I really love the 3rd album, Black Messiah. But it took more than 10 years for that one to come. And during that interim, I remember sometimes I would think about it and be like, man, sure, I'm a good scratch DJ. Fine, I'm a good DJ. But I'm not D'Angelo level. I'm not God on earth. I don't actually know what it feels like to make perfection. Or fucking MJ, Michael Jackson, right? Like if you've made Thriller, I think even Bad is fucking excellent. And then there's the weirder albums later, but you hear about like the obsessive studio sessions for years and years and years and years. For someone like an MJ or a D'Angelo, when you actually know what it's like to create perfection, what must it feel like in that person's mind when you're making something later on and everyone around you is like, it's great, let's put it out, it's great, yo, the record's done, put it out, and you know that it's not actually that perfection.
Deep down inside.
Don't get me wrong, I really love D'Angelo's 3rd album, but that chunk between Voodoo and that, and everyone will be like, what's you waiting for? Sometimes I would try to just empathize with him and be like, man, what must that be like when you're in that?
I don't know, because I've never done it, but I think that's why so many great artists are fucking lunatics.
Yeah,
like Kurt Cobain.
Yeah,
like they were so perfect for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it just couldn't go any further.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, Amy Winehouse.
Yeah.
Like there's multiple artists that are like that, and you're just like, I don't know what it's like to be them. I wouldn't. If I truly ask myself, I don't know if I'd want that. Yes, I would to a certain extent, but am I willing to allow my mental health, my views, my opinions, everything go completely out of the window to gain that success?
Yeah. That's a tough one.
It's a
And
dark
when you add
horse.
to that the exploitative pressures of a record industry that is made to just fucking squeeze that fucking lemon, like
Yep.
juice the fruit, you know?
I'm
And
really,
when you,
yeah. I'm really
yeah,
interested to see what happens with Billie Eilish in the next 10 years.
yeah,
Because
I really hope that she navigates it well.
same, because like she's like genuinely one of my favorite artists that's come out,
Mhm.
and her and her brother are genuinely, for me personally, like that's in the commercial market, making the most interesting music, and
Yeah,
they seem very grounded.
yeah,
There's no crazy shit going on there. There's no crazy
yeah.
views going on there, and
And you know, as someone I'm very close to my brother still now, and we make music together, but we also like are each other's support system in a lot of
yeah,
ways. Um, that kind of bond in some cases can, I mean, I know for me that's been a huge part of me not losing my mind,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
through the years of like navigating a record industry that is quite exploitative and that kind of puts the artists last in a lot of ways.
yeah,
So hopefully they have that for each other too.
yeah.
Like, and it doesn't have to be literally a sibling, but just someone in your life that has truly no other vested interest, but like that someone who truly just wants what's best for you.
They just
I
love you.
think, yeah, yeah. I think if those artists that do have that person in their life, that could be the make or break thing.
I agree. I agree. Talking about record labels
Yeah,
and all of that good stuff, Fool's Gold.
yeah.
Like for me, Fool's Gold growing up was like the most iconic record label during a period of time, and getting to meet you and know you over the years, and to know that
Mhm.
what obviously I known your history, but for me, Fool's Gold was like a period of my life where like it was like the most iconic record label, and it's done
Amazing.
multiple things in multiple genres, and it's a true record label to me. I struggle in electronic music record labels where it just sounds the same. I really struggle with that.
Yeah.
And I understand why. Completely understand why it is like that.
Yeah, I mean the why is the thing we were saying earlier
Yeah.
about like the same way if I was a DJ who was known for one thing, I could probably maybe Fool's Gold would be the top selling label on Beatport. Like
Yeah.
there are lanes where that leads to good business.
Yeah. But does it lead to good art? I would question that.
I agree.
So I kind of want to like get into some detail about Fool's Gold
Sure.
and the whole process behind it, really. And
Okay.
I love that you had a shop. There's something for me that's
Yeah,
like so
and
tangible about that.
oh yeah, we had to close it in 2020 when the pandemic started,
Yeah.
but I'm really hoping to open something next year. It's such a big part of what we do, and just like helping to communicate that it's more than a label, that it's, you know, there's the community aspect and just like even a place where, you know, things intersect.
I think it's so important for the industry to have record shops generally. And I know the shop that you had wasn't just a record shop; you sold multiple things, and it was kind of a community place.
Mm-hmm.
But like for me, and I'm sure you agree and kind of remember, but like going into vinyl record shops, there was something about it like that just brought everyone together. There was always a slight arrogance behind the people that were working there, which I loved.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that first time going into a record shop, like you would be, I personally would be shitting my pants, especially if it was a new record shop I've never been into and nobody knows who I am. It's like
Yeah, for
everyone
sure.
looks at you like, who the fuck is this dude?
Yeah. Love that.
But like, there's also a level of community when you get involved with that I feel is so lost nowadays in most things music because it's all online.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Fool's Gold Shop never had that attitude that you described, but I used to go to New York, you know, even when I lived in Montreal, and I would go to Fat Beats or some of these record shops. And yeah, even if you like picked a record and wanted to hear it, you know, you knew that the person at the counter might just look at you and be like, I can't hear this shit, you know? And like, so just the hopes that they're okay with your choice of thing that you're of a record that you're thinking of buying. But yeah, no. So with Fool's Gold specifically, what can I share?
I want to know, like, pretty much. I kind of want to talk about how it started and the reasoning behind starting it, and the process of like back then you just come off the Kanye stuff, or you were still doing the Kanye stuff, and then after the Kanye stuff, it's like, how do you find artists? What are you looking for to make a record label back then work?
Yeah. So I moved to New York in 2006. My DJing itself was kind of changing. I was getting into a lot of newer sounds.
Yeah.
You know, and I was playing a lot more electronic music, but even on the rap side, you know, on one hand, there was like things were becoming regional in an interesting way.
Yeah.
There was like hypey records from the Bay, you know, and like just cool Southern records. Like just you'd hear something from Texas and be like, what planet is this from? Like it was just cool again. And then at the same time, there was starting to be new kind of like DJ fueled, like kind of club rap projects, like Spank Rock, for example, you know, and around the same time that like there were even just early MIA records, early Santa Gold records. Yeah. So that scene was bubbling, you know, and I moved to New York and I kind of like embraced that scene in a little bit of a departure from the underground battle DJ hip hop scene that I was originally, you know, from. And the more I embraced that scene, and the more I started kind of making my own little edits and bootlegs too, and you know, getting into the blog world and all of that, and MySpace and everything that was catalyzed from these things at the same time. I was also starting to experiment with like a bit of a newer sound with production. Yeah. Because prior to that, what I had done, you know, production or beat wise was either like the scratch music stuff that I mentioned earlier that kind of sounded like a Qbert scratch record, or even just some like sample based, slower instrumental project ideas that I never really put out, but stuff that felt like DJ Shadow, I would say. Yeah. RJD2 and DJ Shadow, and, you know, listening to a lot of Madlib and shit like that, which I still absolutely love, but I started playing all this fast club music, and there's a point where I was like, I should probably make tracks that are similar to what I'm playing. And, you know, I met Flostradamus and I met Kid Sister from Chicago and got involved with producing some of her early records too. And you know, around the same time, befriended Nick Cashdubs, who was a New York DJ, who was also working at the Fader and had a really influential blog and just kind of had an ear for all kinds of cool, interesting new shit. Yeah. And so in a way that he was really a great curator. And Nick and I built a friendship off of just sending music to each other. You know, this is iChat era. Yeah. And we would just send files over iChat. Have you heard this? Have you heard this? But it also turned into like, man, have you heard that album? Why does the artwork stuff? Why does the artwork suck? The music is so great. Like there's like conversations that started to feel like fantasy label conversations, like, yo, the record's so good, but yeah, the cover's weird, or why did they choose this as a single, or like, damn, like that B-side should have been the A-side, like those kinds of conversations. And I had a label before that. My brother and I, when we were still in Montreal, had a backpacker underground hip hop label called Audio Research. But that was like 10 years old at that point, and it was pretty dormant. We hadn't put anything out on it in a couple of years. But because I had run previously a label on the underground hip hop side, I also knew that like pressing up vinyl is actually not that complicated. And like these things that feel like the great unknown and that feel like magic tricks, especially at that point in time, to me, it was like, it's not that hard to like, you know, just get a lawyer to draw up a contract. You sign an artist to like a one single deal. It's fine. You know, press up the vinyl. You send it to, we already know people in the industry. So you send it to a couple people to hopefully get reviews. Like it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, you know, I had that view of running a label. It wasn't a total unknown. And in some ways, Kid Sister's music was kind of a catalyst where, you know, we were sitting on a couple tracks, some of which were produced by myself, some of which were produced by Triple Exchange, who was also doing this bank rock project. And none of the bigger labels could really figure out what was going on, like what to sign. And there was just something going on in our scene. Diplo had recently started Mad Decent. In fact, Nick Cash Subs did the logo for Mad Decent before he and I started Fool's Gold. So, you know, it kind of just turned into me and him being like, well, why don't we start a label and put out some of these records? You know, I had also met the cool kids through Flostradamus. You know, we were friends with Sammy Bananas. There was just like this crew of people around us that were making cool shit. You know, I was making Dirty South Dance too. Like there's, you know, there was in a quick brainstorm, we could make a list of like 6 or 7 things that we could put out already.
Yeah.
You know, so we decided to start a label, and you know, I brought in Dave as I don't want to say a silent partner, but just like partner at large. Like he wasn't gonna, like he was already doing Chromeo. He wasn't going to, you know, run the day to day, but like had a bunch of ideas, especially on the sort of big picture direction and creative direction, which is what Dave has always helped me with my stuff also.
Yeah.
So kind of bringing him in, like, hey, you get me, you get 2 of us. I'm bringing my brother. He's gonna have all kinds of ideas.
Love that.
And we also brought in Dust LaRock to do all the artwork, and Dust ended up designing everything for the first 5 years of the label. But that's how we started. It was kind of in the spirit of like, hey, if no one else is gonna sign this shit, and if we're having these conversations every other day, then let's just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, we also saw what Ed Banger was doing in Europe. And I would say that like the level of involvement that Pedro was giving to Somi on a, you know, visual branding level was an influence to, you know, how much power we gave to Dust LaRock. Like, yo, create a world, go nuts. You know, like that was an influence. But also I should mention that like even back in my teenager hip hop years, I was quite close to Peanut Butter Wolf in the early years of Stone's Throw. You know, and I think I mentioned earlier that I've had like a few teachers. Like he's one of those figures in my life too, who I spent a lot of time around him when I was like 17, 18.
Yeah.
I was there when he signed Loot Pack, which pretty much meant signing Madlib.
Yeah.
I was there when Madlib lived at the house with him and Jeff and Egon, and you know, I could just see everything that went into the making of, you know, those, you know, some releases on Stone's Throw in late 90s to early 2000s, many of which were hugely influential projects. So that was another thing that I observed, you know, and certain way of like prioritizing the artistry and of not being scared to making bold choices. Like I would see Wolf sign shit to Stone's Throw, like just weird, bizarro shit that he was into, and he would just be like, "Fuck it, I'll just press a 7-inch.
Yeah.
I don't care if no one likes it, or maybe someone out there is gonna. If I'm finding this cool and funny and interesting, someone out there will like it."
Yeah.
And taking that approach to signings, really, really trusting your gut as opposed to like doing market research and following what another label is doing. So that was an influence for sure. Looking at labels like Mo Wax and Warp, like but also again, going back to the underground hip hop days, looking at a label like Raucous, where I remember as a DJ, there was a trust where, at least during a certain period of time, anything that came out on Raucous, I would buy that 12-inch. Wanting to build that with Fool's Gold, wanting to get to a point where you go to Amoeba or whatever record shop and there's a section that says Fool's Gold and people just want to get whatever's in that little section.
For me, that's the key thing.
That's the goal, man.
It's having the identity as a record label that no matter what, even if it's a shit record, and I don't mean this in a horrible way, even if it's a shit record, people are still going to buy it because they want in on the Fool's Gold.
Yep. And even that shit record, there's probably something interesting about it a couple of years later.
100%.
You can go back to it and be like, okay, well, what made them sign this?
100%.
What was the thought process? And there's probably still a little nugget of something interesting there.
It's like classic cars. It's like the cars that were like awful when they first came out. And then 30, 40 years down the line, they're like worth hundreds of thousands of pounds or dollars.
Yeah.
It's so important. So important. But you only create that through community.
Yeah. But also just like real like intention behind every decision. Like really knowing what your vision is, what's what it is that you're drawn to, and figuring out how to find that and how to nurture that, grow that.
Are you still releasing regularly?
We certainly didn't know how to run a business. We certainly, and distribution itself barely existed in those years.
Yeah.
Distribution was chaos for years.
Yeah.
But we were just kind of like, but we fostered an audience, and we threw parties right from the first year of the label, and we started doing merch right from the first year of the label. So right from year one, it was label, events, merch.
Yeah.
And those remain the three branches of the company. And I really do believe that those three things together built an audience. And, bumpy business shit along the roads, you figure that out, totally. Behind closed doors along the way, and you clean things up.
That's the fun of it in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, like it's funny, man. I still feel a little naive to certain things. There's just a few months ago, I listened to a podcast that my friend actually did about the label Loud Records. For any listeners who might not know, in the 90s, especially the second half of the 90s, Loud Records had Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, The Alcoholics, Big Pun, like just an incredible roster of amazing rap artists, all of which were very influential and unique. And there's a podcast that my friend Noah did a few months ago where he interviewed the two founders of the label, and they talked about like what things were like behind closed doors. And to hear those guys talk about how chaotic the business was and how every year they almost went under, they almost went bankrupt, and they signed one deal that contradicted another deal, and that caused a huge blah blah blah, huge problem. But every time a record connects, that's the Band-Aid that fixes everything.
Totally.
It made me feel like Fool's Gold was like a fucking example of shining excellence in independent business running in comparison. Not that I think we've done a bad job, but we definitely had some lessons along the way, and a couple of scary periods for sure.
It wouldn't be a business though without that, right? And
yeah, I guess. And we've never wanted to take big investments or backing or I mean, the only joint venture we ever did was something that we didn't even use in the early years. We had a brief joint venture with Downtown Records,
yeah,
where we put out an album by The Susan, an all-female garage rock band from Japan that didn't sell anything, but I still think it's cool.
yeah.
and Fool's Gold Volume 1, a compilation. So that joint venture was not even like a, we didn't even really use it. So for the most part, independent the whole way. So yeah, you're gonna run into scary forks in the road and junctures, and
Are you still releasing regularly on it?
Yeah, this year is one of our busiest years in a long time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I haven't really honestly paid much attention to it.
I'll send you some of the newer stuff, but we're about to put out an album by Muzi, who's a South African artist, producer, vocalist. So we put out 2 singles, and the album comes out in a month. We're also starting to set up an album by Frank Leone, who's an artist from Chicago, also multi-instrumentalist, singer, rapper, kind of does it all. Still putting out a bunch of house singles. There's a single by Matt Joe and Thando 1988 that's kind of doing well right now. It's a fun one. I put out most of my stuff, pretty much all my stuff, on Fool's Gold. We're about to put out a really cool EP by George Reed from Aluna George.
Amazing. He's great. He's so good.
He's really good. Yeah. I got to send you that. We just got the masters yesterday. There's a bunch. There's some hip hop stuff coming up in a couple months that I'm really excited about too. So it's fun, and we're pressing up a compilation LP for the 15th anniversary. So yeah, it keeps me busy, man. Damn. But the other thing that I love about doing Fool's Gold is like it keeps me in a place where I have to keep up with all the newest shit. So it's like, who's the newest people throwing parties? Who's, because even just, for example, like we're doing all these anniversary parties this year for the 15th anniversary, and I'll go and book like some sort of headliner. Like later today, I'm announcing a party that we're doing at Public Records in a couple weeks, where we have DJ Shadow performing. But if I have Shadow performing, I also want to put, like, who's my opening DJ? Well, I'll go and find whoever's like buzzing,
the new kid,
new kid that's just on the scene now, making their way up. Like that balance is always so important to Fool's Gold. A few weeks ago, we had Mark Ronson play one of our parties, but then we had this rapper Clip, who's really new and really cool. We had Dwells play one of the earlier sets too, and again, that cross-generational thing is really important to Fool's Gold.
It is. It's important to bring new kids through. Generally, just for the scene, it's so important. Yeah. One last thing before we go, and this is purely for me to self-indulge. Duck sauce.
Yeah.
Like, this was something that I didn't ever know that I wanted until it came out. How did that kind of come about? And how the fuck did you make Big Bad Wolf?
Oh, you know what? Big Bad Wolf specifically, there is a funny story to how we made it. Duck Sauce came about just from Armand and I becoming friends.
Yeah.
Armand is a character, man. He is a one of one human. When I moved to New York, I met him and kind of similar to the way that I described that thing with Mehdi, where like I would sometimes meet someone and be like, oh, we get each other. Because Armand also always kept that sort of b-boy that like, I'm a hip hop guy, but I'm making house music. Like even as far as saying like, I don't even listen to this shit. I just make it, like whatever. Apparently it works. This is just what I do. We clicked on that level, and we just hung out, for a couple years. when I was fresh in New York, and he was really interested in like the scene, that early Fool's Gold scene, the Blockhouse thing and all that. Like that felt exciting to him. So I would, we would just like go to parties and just hang out at his crazy apartment. And like, we didn't make music before like maybe 3 years of just like kicking it. We just became friends first.
I love that.
Yeah. I think by the time we made music, we had a good sense of like what our chemistry was.
Yeah.
And initially that first year we made Anyway, that came a little bit from, I had a general idea or suggestion. Like Armand often tells the story of like us first getting in the studio and him turning to me like, what are we making? And me saying disco house. And then he just had a ton of samples and, we ended up making Anyway. But we made Anyway at the height of the most distorted version of Bloghouse. Like when that sort of like After Justice, when Bloody Beetroots and some of those acts were like just distorting everything more than ever, and everything was just very, very hard. I just kind of had a hunch that the world needed soul and disco and a bit of a refresher,
And it did.
It landed well. It was kind of welcomed with open arms. And from that point on, we just started making more tracks. And, Barbara was the following year. Big Bad Wolf, I do remember there was a funny thing where originally there was a sample and we put drums to it the little bass line. And we're trying to find something to add to it. And after Barbra Streisand, there was a little bit of that formula of like, oh, do we say a word on it? And Armand was wearing a T-shirt that had a wolf, so I remember just being like, well, why don't we say Big Bad Wolf? And I would sometimes even just like pick up on cues of things he'd done in the past, in the sense that like, he made Witch Doctor. Like we can make other tracks that just have a word that you say. And he was done doing that, but it was long enough since those records came out for me to sort of come with my perspective and be like, no, we can do that now. So we said Big Bad Wolf, and Armand, in a moment of brilliance, just muted the sample. And it was all that was left was just the drums and the little bass line and that vocal. And it was like, I think this is the song. And that's how that one came. So I remember he had a T-shirt with a wolf, and then he muted the sample.
I literally remember the first time I heard that record, and I was in a car and driving along near where I live, and I was like, because obviously I knew from what you guys had done previously, and then from almost to me, and it might be different to you, but the departure from Barbra Streisand to Big Bad Wolf, I was like, this is the shit I need in my life. And
well, thank you. A lot of people didn't feel that way, but we liked pissing people off. I think there's something with a duo also where it's even a little easier to be confident in that sort of decision of like, people are going to hate us, but that's kind of cool.
Yeah, right? And you're like together for it. And you can both stand by it and be like, fuck you all, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, because Barbra Streisand, we really didn't expect it to go where it went, but it became a pop record, and it hit charts in all kinds of countries, and people were listening to it without being house fans. Big Bad Wolf is a record that I think makes sense if you know the Witch Doctor, or if you know like old Kashmir records, if you know Chicago house and New York house. But like, if Barbra Streisand was number one in the Czech Republic or whatever, and like some 15-year-old is like, oh, what's the new Duck Sauce record? We would get the weirdest comments on, even on YouTube or whatever after Big Bad Wolf came out, because people would be like, what the fuck is this? Because they just wanted another Barbra Streisand. But also, what is another Barbra Streisand? Like,
you can't do it again.
You kind of have to choose something. And maybe we were just a little cocky in that period, thinking like, hey, we could just like, let's rock with this shit. Fuck it. And that's what we did.
I'm glad you did. Like,
Thanks.
I've tried to remake record, like using Big Bad Wolf as a template.
Oh yeah.
I've tried so many times to not recreate, but like make something similar. And every time I'm just like, nah, Big Bad Wolf is the one. Every time, and it's an amazing record, man. It's an amazing record, and yeah, I'm glad that you guys made that. It was a period in my life that was like really interesting. And you know what? I've actually never DJ'd it. I've never played it out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, never. It's just
It was fun to play out. It would kind of make people go crazy.
yeah.
Like with the howl. Like it brought out like a feral thing in people.
Oh, I love that, man. I love that.
Yeah.
Dude, we've done like an hour and 40 minutes, and I feel like we could carry on talking, but I don't want anybody to switch off because I think we can just indulge into everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. Like,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Your career is very unique, but thank you for everything you've done for the industry, man. Like, genuinely, you are one of the people that just keeps pushing forward, and we need people like you. So I really appreciate that.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Love what you do, obviously on the DJ and production side, but the podcast is great too. I've gotten to listen to more episodes even just recently. It's awesome.
Thank you, man. Means a lot.
Yeah.
Keep in touch. How can people get involved with you and Fool's Gold and everything that you're up to? How can people kind of keep in the loop?
Yeah, it's just, A-Trak on all the socials and Fool's Gold Rex, as in records, everywhere too. So
cool, man. Dude, thank you so much. Keep in touch and see you soon.
Thanks, man.
Peace, man. Big love to A-Trak for coming on. Love that conversation. It was amazing. Thanks to everybody listening. Go hit subscribe. Go give us a review. Share it with your friends. Keep safe. Get involved in the Discord. The link is in the description. And I will see you same time next week. Big love.